All right, time for us to get started. Good to have everybody with us. This is going to be a look at Genesis as we focus on our theme of celebrating the seasons of faith. Our first quarter we spent with the idea of winter, and we went through how the Bible ends. So we talked about Revelation. So now we flip to spring, and we're going to go to the very beginning. How does the Bible begin? And that's what we're doing. Unlike Revelation, we're not going to be able to go through every chapter. There's 50 chapters in Genesis, and we cannot cover them all. Most likely, we'll just get up to maybe Abraham. But there's several concepts, principles that are built here in the first few chapters, and that's kind of where we want to begin. So if you got an outline, there's an outline at the back. We're going to begin with a quiz. What do you know even before we get started? So let's just jump into this, see what you know, and we'll talk about it. So we begin, first of all, the book of Genesis, considered part of the Torah, the Pentateuch, neither, or both. Okay, what does Torah mean? Law. Okay, what does Pentateuch mean? First five books. Okay, we got the Pentagon. If you look at it, it has 5 shapes on it. Okay, 5 sides. So the book of Genesis is both part of the Torah and the Pentateuch. Secondly, an example of a prehistoric animal would be A, an alligator, brontosaurus, iguana, or none of these. Dan, what do you think? B? D? B or D? Okay. I'm hearing a lot of D's, a lot of E's. Okay. This is not a trick question. This is one of the things this study is going to help us to see. Why do you come up with D? Okay. First of all, the word pre means what? Before. Historic is really the history of man. So prehistoric would be before man. Man and animals were made on the same day if we believe Genesis 1, don't we? So there's no such thing as prehistoric. And that blows away every museum you go to, every science show you see on TV, everything about it. And that's one reason why we have these studies, because we hear so much and we think, oh, yeah, man, this was 500 million years ago. It's prehistoric. Be careful. Be careful. What's that going to do to what I believe about Genesis? You see that? Number 3, when God made a lion, its original diet would have included small animals, plants, or large and small animals. See, where did you get that from? You're right. Let's turn your Bible. Let me just show you this real quickly. Genesis chapter 1. Genesis chapter 1, look at the last 2 verses. Once again, that just changes how we see things. Now, what we're going to notice, there's been a change take place. If we go to the zoo today and we give him a nice salad, that lion's not going to eat that nice salad. He'll eat your hand who gives you that salad, okay? And lions today are meat eaters, but not originally. Genesis chapter 1, look at verse 29 and verse 30. Then God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that's on the surface of all the earth, and every tree which has fruit yielding seed, it shall be food for you, don't stop, and to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the sky, and to everything that moves on the earth, which is life, I have given every green plant for food, and it was so. So originally, everything was vegetarian, originally. See that? And again, it's not how I heard things. That's right. That's why we look at the Bible. Number 4, no human being ever saw a living dinosaur. True, false, we are unable to know. Yeah. No human being ever saw a living dinosaur? That's false. That's false. If God created dinosaurs, and we believe Genesis chapter 1, they were made right there at the same time, weren't they? Okay? Again, that just changes everything we hear about dinosaurs, everything we've ever been told about dinosaurs. Again, it's just not what we see. Number 5, there's a lot here. The difference between evolution and creation is evolution is based upon evidence and creation is based upon faith. B, evolution has been proven, creation has not been proven. C, evolution belongs in classrooms and creation belongs in church house. D, both are systems of faith. D, both are systems of faith. And we'll be talking about that in the coming weeks. Both of them are systems of faith. Beginning points are different, but they both have that starting point. Number 6, the caveman concept is a good illustration of Adam. True, false, we don't know. Again, how do we know that? What would we pull out from Adam from the first pages of the book of Genesis? Adam could do what? He grunted and pulled Eve by the hair to the cave and drew pictures of animals on the wall. Fred Flintstone, right? Number 1, he could communicate, wouldn't he? God was talking to him. He told him to till the garden. So immediately he knew how to farm, okay? He named all the animals. He has a sense of intelligence about him. You see that? You see this? And so, and just a few pages after this, we're going to see even more that they do. So again, the reason why we do this is sometimes we begin just reading the book of Genesis and we forget about all these things I've been told all my life in school and everything. One of the things we're going to dismiss real quickly next week, I forgot to say this, next week read chapter 1, and there's outlines in the back that has your questions for chapter 1. One of the things I remember in grade school, plant kingdom, animal kingdom. Man is part of the animal kingdom. Wrong. Genesis 1 is going to show us that. We're different than the animal kingdom. And again, that's something significant as we think about following what God says. See, Adam was the first man. Possibly, yes, no, we don't know. Yes. Let's put a verse on that. 1 Corinthians 15. 1 Corinthians 15, as Paul is talking about the resurrection of Jesus. He says in verse 45, he says, so it is written, the first man, Adam, became a living soul. The last Adam, talking about Jesus, became a life-giving spirit. The first man, Adam. Okay? Once again, that's some of that concept that's going to help us to see and appreciate as we think about this. So down below here, let's talk about Genesis as a book. Today we kind of begin with the overview, talk about some things. Next week we're going to go through chapter 1. Following week, we're going to talk about some worldviews, how what the world has taught us doesn't line up with what the Bible says, and to look at some of those things. So the authorship of Genesis is attributed to Moses, although nowhere in this it says that he wrote this. But there's a lot of evidence that kind of makes us think he did. Point 2, by word count, counting the words, Genesis is the second largest book in the Bible. The largest would be Jeremiah. The word Genesis means beginnings, okay? And we say, well, what began? Really everything but God. Okay, we can talk about values, relationships, sin, salvation, judgment, death, family, marriage. But really there's a flow when we think about the beginnings in Genesis. It begins, first of all, by talking about life. All life. All life goes back to God. That's very important to see. But from this, it goes to talking about the beginning of a nation, Israel. And from that, it's going to talk about the beginnings of salvation, promised to Abraham, but all the way filled through the rest of these people here. And so that's going to be some of the significant things we see about that. Now, when we look at Genesis, the second page here, it begins with man in the garden. The book ends with the people of God in Egypt. Now, the first 11 chapters covers Adam to Abraham. That covers 2,000 years. The next 39 chapters, 12 to 50, is Abraham to Joseph's death, and that's 300 years. So once you get just the massive amount of time we deal with in these first few chapters. First few chapters covers a long period of time. And that's interesting. There are 10 sections that's called Toldoth. I probably didn't say that right. But that means generations or account. Let me just run through these. I think they're on the outline, but let me just show them to you. Chapter 2, verse 4. This is the account of the heavens and the earth. Chapter 5, verse 1. This is the book of generations of Adam. In chapter 6, and verse 9. These are the records of generations of Noah. And then we look in chapter 10, verse 1. Chapter 10, verse 1 says, "These are the records of the generations of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, sons of Noah." Then we would look in chapter 11, verse 10. These are the records of the... Do you notice how all these sections are set off? These are the generations. These are the generations. So he does that 10 times in the book of Genesis, kind of setting off unique time periods. Now, why was the book of Genesis written? I think it was written through Moses as Israel was in the wilderness getting ready to go into the promised land. And God did two things for them. First thing he did was he repeated the law, Deuteronomy, do it, duets, two. It's a repeating of the law. And the second thing he did was to show them their origin and their relationship to the one true God. You're getting ready to go into a pagan land, and you're going to see all kinds of things you've not seen before. And so I'm preparing you. So when you look at this passage on the outline, Deuteronomy chapter 18, it says, "When you enter the land which the Lord your God gives you, you shall not learn to imitate the detestable things of these nations. There shall not be found among you those who make their son or daughter pass through the fire." That would be a human sacrifice. "One who uses divination, who practices witchcraft, or one who interprets omens or sorcery, or one who casts a spell, or a medium, or a spiritualist, or one who calls up the dead. For whoever does these things is detestable to the Lord, and because of these detestable things, the Lord your God will drive them out before you. You shall be blameless before the Lord your God." So what he's doing is they're entering the land. You're going to see idols. You're going to see all kinds of wild things you've never seen before. Stay true to God. So I'm telling you the law again, getting you to understand the law. And secondly, I want to tell you your origins. In the beginning, God. It's God who made man. It's God who made the nation. It's God who's leading you. And just a reminder of that. Now, when we think about these concepts, I think some of it was true into that promised land they went, but a lot of it's just true today. Pantheism. Pantheism is a concept that God is everything and everything is God. Tree is God. God is a tree. God is a cloud. God is a bird. Everything is God, and God is everything. That's pantheism. Polytheism means several gods. This is particularly true of the land they're going into. They would worship the sun, they'd worship the moon, they'd worship fertility, they'd worship rivers, they'd worship all kinds of things. I think getting them out of Egypt, those 10 plagues were a direct strike against some of the gods that Egypt worshiped. And so polytheism is that there was multiple types of gods. Deism, that's where a lot of our founding fathers were. A lot of people think our founding fathers were Christians. Really, they were deists. And what a deist is, they believe God made the world, but then God took a step back, and God's not involved with us anymore. We're just kind of on our own, kind of like winding up the clock and just let the clock run. That's the concept of a deist. Agnostic is someone who believes, he thinks there's a God, but he's not sure. I just don't know if there is a God or not. I'm just not sure. And then an atheist is one who says there is no God. And again, we'll be talking about some of those things. But when you say, okay, then we look at all that, what are we? We'd be called monotheistic, that we believe in one true God. And I want you to notice how that very first sentence knocks down every one of those things. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. God. That takes care of atheism. It didn't just happen. God did it. That takes care of polytheism. There's not multiple gods. There is one God. That takes care of pantheism. Everything's God and God's everything. No, because before that there was nothing, just God, and then God made. And that takes care of that. Deism, he's removed himself. No, he's very involved. He's the one who created such things. Agnosticism, we don't know if he's there or not. We do know because he's revealed himself. And so again, as we look at this and we start going through this, it's helpful to put yourself in the shoes of Israel, who were getting ready to go into that promised land and go into a culture where there's all this different deities. And what God wanted his people to do is be true to him. And the same thing goes to us today. All kinds of ideas about God, all kinds of theories about God. And we need to stick with what the Bible says and kind of go with that. So, why is Genesis important to us? Well, first of all, it introduces us to God. And through what he has created, we see his nature, we see his characteristics, we understand him. Okay, without the Bible, you may know in the created world that there's something out there. There's something bigger than we are. But you don't know who it is, and you don't know what he wants. So it's through the Bible we know God. We know what he wants. And he never leaves it up to us. He never just says, okay, get together some day of the week and just do something. He never says that. He outlines exactly what he wants, because other than that, we wouldn't know. We wouldn't know what to do. And so one of the great things Genesis does as it begins this stuff, it begins by helping us understand God. And what we learn is that God is not us. God's not a better form of us. God's different than us, and how that we are accountable to him. Secondly, it answers the big questions in life. Where did I come from? Why am I here? Why is there suffering? Why do people have to die? What's my purpose? And to an extent, where am I going? And so all the big questions in life are seen in the book of Genesis. And again, how many people struggle with those today? You know, the one with the most toys wins. Well, that's great until you go to the cemetery, then what? And one of the leading arguments against God today is suffering. Why does a little child get cancer and die? If God was good and God is there, that shouldn't happen. Well, that comes from a person who doesn't understand the nature of suffering. Why is there suffering? What's the point of suffering? You see that? And so in Genesis, as is the rest of the Bible, we learn things about that. It establishes a chain of command. And this is going to be a secondary lesson we're going to run through here, and that's authority. Understanding that God says things, and he doesn't have to ask our permission, but that there is a divine authority, and we need to follow that. That's true in our lives. That's true as we worship. That's true as a church. And that authority comes out as we think about Genesis. We sometimes talk about that blueprint. Okay, whatever we do has to be done by the Word of God. And that comes from that concept. Now, when we don't have that established, this is where people say, why can't I change my gender? What would be wrong with that? What would be wrong with us having people come up and down and sell popcorn and drinks during services? I don't think anything would be wrong with that. I'd kind of like that. What would be wrong with a church buying a business and making more money? What would be wrong with that? And what happens is, once you walk away from God's blueprint, anything happens. And that's what we see in the religious community today. We see all kinds of stuff out there. And we say, well, how do you get to do that? Well, they haven't understood the authority of God. In the beginning, God. He didn't get a committee of people together and say, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? No, in the beginning, God. And so there's that chain of command that begins here. And we need to talk about that. It shows us also the love of God in the scheme of redemption. We'll read as we get to chapter 3 about Adam and Eve. We see the serpent there talking to Eve. It's going to be an interesting conversation as we look at that. And he tempts her. He deceives her. She takes the forbidden fruit. Adam takes it also. And then we don't read about the serpent. Where is he? He created a mess and he left. God had to come in and clean up the mess. He always does. And why did he do that? Because he loves us. And so he wants us to be with him. And that's kind of the idea behind all that. And again, it helps us kind of see that concept with that. It also is going to help us to define what marriage is. In the beginning, God created them male and female, and that's what he put together. Okay? What would be wrong with two guys getting married if they didn't hurt anybody and they just love each other? Well, who makes up marriage? God does. Well, what would be wrong with one person marrying three people? Well, Who defines marriage? God does. So you see that? And so again, coming out of this simple book, a lot of fundamental principles that we read about over and over again. One of the things it's going to teach us about is going to teach us about choices, responsibility, and consequences. We'll see that with Cain and Abel. We'll see that with Eve and Adam and the forbidden fruit. We see that really tracing all through the rest of the book of Genesis, is that you have choices, and there's responsibility, and there's consequences to all of those. And when you don't get that, there's going to be some trouble. And so again, powerful lesson for us, because it puts it right where we are today. We have responsibilities, we have choices, and we have consequences. It shows us how mankind is different and unique from the rest of creation. Okay? And God did not say that we and animals are on par with each other. Okay? We may love our pets to death, but you know what? We're different than our pets. Okay? And our pets are not our children. Okay? They're animals. As much as we love and as much money we pour into those things, they are animals. We are different than that. Okay? And that's going to be something we see here in the first few pages of Genesis. And then it's going to shake many of my preconceived ideas that I've heard and learned through school and reading and different things. And I'm going to learn a lot of things I always thought was true is not going to be true. A lot of things that people have always said. You go to some museum and here's this dinosaur, here's this fossil, and it's millions and millions of years old. Is that true? I don't know. And we'll talk about that. So, with what time we have left, let's go to Genesis chapter 1. Let's just read it together this morning. And I want you to notice several things as we read this, okay? And then we'll come back next week and kind of go through it. There's lots of things we want to raise the hood on this, and then once you notice a lot of things, we'll save that for them. But right now, I want you just to hear the flow of this and notice some things that take place. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the waters. Let's stop there for a minute. Right there, these first two verses. What are some things we know we don't know? What are some things we know and we don't know? Yeah. God doesn't have a beginning. So when it says in the beginning, it's the beginning of life, not counting God, because God is eternal. Okay? That's one thing we know. Do we know how long ago this took place? We don't know that, do we? We don't know how long ago this took place. I mean, everybody wants to talk about millions of years or young earth, old earth, young earth. It doesn't say, does it? That's really not important. What's important here is how it started. It started with God. Then God said, verse 3, "Let there be light," and there was light. Right there, what do you learn? What do you learn about that? God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. What does that tell you about God? It's powerful. It didn't say that he was Edison, and my understanding, Edison tried 1,000 things first before he got the light bulb to work. He had a lot of failures. It didn't say God had a laboratory. All God has to do is say it, and it is. We know nothing like that. Okay? Now, next week, we're going to talk about this word create. Hebrew word is bara. We're going to talk about what that word means. But once you see, he creates light. Now, one of the things I want you to notice, jumping on down here just a little bit, let me see, verse 14, is that right? 16, he's going to make the sun and the moon. Okay? Down here about verse 14, 15, and 16, he makes the sun and the moon. So up here in verse 3, we made light. What did he make? See, we have light. I can say, well, it's because of the light bulbs. Okay? I got these bright ones that shine right in my eyes. That's why I have light. There was no sun, there was no moon, there was no stars, but he made light. Think about that. We'll talk about that next week. Interesting concept, isn't it? Because when we think about light, we think, well, he made the sun. Well, no, that doesn't come down here till a little bit later on, doesn't it? But he made light. God saw the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. Verse 5, God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. There was evening, there was morning, one day. And one of your questions are going to be, this is a marriage some people try to force together, is that one day might have been thousands and thousands of years, or others say between day 1, day 2, there could have been millions of years, and then day 2, millions of years, and day 3. Okay? Called the gap age. Very popular. Okay? There's even a theory that people have, it's called theistic evolution, that God chose evolution as a means to make this. Okay? We'll talk about that. Okay? So then, it says, where did I leave off at? 6. Then God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. And God made the expanse and separated the waters which were below the expanse from the waters which were above the expanse, and it was so. So we got to talk about, what does he mean by expanse? Waters above, waters below. Now when we get to chapter 6 and 7, we talk about Noah and the ark. We talk about that big flood. We're going to see water coming from everywhere. Okay, not just from the sky, but also from the ground. But we see an expanse there. Okay, God called the expanse heaven. And there was evening and there was morning, a second day. Verse 9. Then God said, let the waters below the heavens be gathered into one place, and let dry land appear, and it was so. Now, 2 thoughts there. Go back up to verse 2. The earth was formless and void, but now down here he's making dry land. So what was it at the very start? Something to think about, isn't it? Okay. Also notice in verse 9, let's see, let the waters below, let the dry land, okay, let the waters be gathered into one place, and let the dry land appear, and it was so. If we had a globe, and I just kind of spun that globe around, and you're looking at this globe, would you say the water's in one place? No, we talk about the 7 seas, don't we? We have land here, we got Australia over here, we got this over here, we got this over here, we got land everywhere. But not originally, was it? It's like all the water was in one place and the land was in one place. So how did we get our continents? That's going to come up. That's going to come up in our study, okay? Something to think about, okay? And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering of the waters he called seas, and God saw that it was good. Verse 11, then God said, let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, fruit trees on the earth, bearing fruit after its kind, with seed in them, and it was so. Now, do you notice something different between verse 11 and verse 1? In verse 11, let the earth sprout vegetation, but in verse 1, God created. See a little difference there? We'll talk about that. Okay? The difference of creating something out of nothing and then putting in all the elements so it springs forth. There's a difference there. The earth, verse 12, brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed after its kind, trees bearing fruit with seed in them after their kind, and God saw that it was good. Now, if you plant a seedling, Jim, you're kind of an outdoor guy. If I plant an apple tree, if I go over here and buy me a little bitty apple tree, and my deer don't eat it, because the deer come to my house. There's a sign out behind my house called Golden Corral, and the deer come every night and eat everything I have. But if I get my little bitty apple tree to grow, how long is it going to take before I have apples? How long is that going to be? Anybody? Next week? Next month? 5 or 6 years. Here's where I'm going. Okay? When we get to the end of this chapter, God's making Adam, isn't he? How's Adam going to eat? If I got this tree for you, here's an orange tree, here's an apple tree, here's a pineapple tree, but you got to wait 5 or 10 years. Oh, Adam's going to die, isn't he? So what did God start with? Mature trees, didn't he? Mature trees that look like they could be 20 years old, but actually they're only 2 days old. You see how that may change how people look at the earth? You see? Because for Adam to survive, he has to be able to survive. And so God's going to put things in here for him to survive. We'll get to this next one here in just a minute too. Okay? And so, 13, there was evening, there was morning, a third day. Then God said, let there be expanse in the heavens, verse 14, to separate the day from the night, and for signs, for seasons and days and years. That's a significant phrase we'll talk about. And let them be for lights in the expanse of heavens to give light on the earth, and it was so. God made 2 great lights, the greater light to govern the day, which we'd call the sun, the lesser light to govern the night, we'd call the moon, and made the stars also. God placed them in their expanse of heavens to give light on the earth and to govern the day and the night and separate the light from the darkness. God saw it was good. There was evening, there was morning, and fourth day. Now, from 14 to 19, God's making the solar system. He's making stars, the moon, and the sun. But when you go back up to verse 11, what's God making in verse 11? He's making plants. Now, here's a thought. If I make plants on day 3, and there's millions of years between each day, and I don't make the sun to day 4, got a problem here, don't we? There are. So you can make a plant day 3 and make the sunshine the next day, nothing's going to happen, is it? Look around here, look how gloomy it's been for the last week or so. Plants can survive without the sun for a day or two. But to say, okay, between each day is millions and millions of years, you got a problem right there, don't you? You see that? And so that's how we start looking at the Bible. And we start seeing things. You know, I've always heard, and then we look at this and wait a minute. That doesn't make any sense, does it? And we start to think about that. Now here's another thing I want you to think about. In verse 16 and 17, he makes the stars. Okay? The closest star to planet Earth, I forgot to look this up, is so many light years away. Okay? There are stars so far out there. If we got in a rocket ship and blast ourselves toward these far out stars, we would die before we ever got there. They are so far away. When we get to chapter 12 about Abraham, God's going to say, look up at the stars. It says that's going to be your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky. So when God started creation, guess what he had to do? He had to bring starlight from far away and bring it right here today. You see, when you look at the night sky, you're looking at things that probably were 3, 4, 5, 10 years ago. It takes that long to get here. So we're looking at things that happened a long time ago. It's not present tense. You look at the sun, that's right now. You look at the moon, it's right now. But you look at some of those planets or stars a long ways away, especially the stars, that's a long time ago. So when God made all these stars, he brought the light right here. And so that again changes how we see things, isn't it? Because scientists will tell you, well now, if it's that far away, then we're talking millions and millions of years for that light to get down to here, and I'm seeing these stars, Adam saw those stars, and it has to be millions of years. No, it didn't. God could put it right there. You see that? And again, that's just changing how we think about things and how we see things. Now, let's go on. And so, verse 20. Then God said, let the waters teem with swarms of living creatures. Now again, you see how he said up above about the vegetation coming from the earth? So now the waters are teeming with swarms of living creatures. Birds fly above the earth in the open expanse of the heavens. God created the great sea monsters. We'll talk about that. And every living creature that moves with what water swarmed after their kind, and every winged bird after its kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them and said, be fruitful, multiply, fill the waters in the seas, and let the birds multiply on the earth. There was evening, there was morning, a fifth day. Then God said, verse 24, let the earth bring forth living creatures after their kind, cattle, creeping things, beasts of the earth after their kind, and it was so. God made the beasts of the earth after their kind, and the cattle. We're going to talk about their kind. That's significant, because our atheistic evolutionists think we can switch and jump over kinds, okay? You can have all kinds of funny dogs, these little doodle something dogs, and cross this dog to this dog and this dog to this dog. But at the end of the day, it's still a dog, isn't it? It's not a monkey, it's a dog. After its kind. There's lanes. We've got to stay in our lane there. That's what God's saying there. God made the beasts of the earth after their kind, and the cattle after their kind, everything that creeps on the earth after its kind. God saw it was good. Then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the sky, over the cattle, and over all the earth, every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. God created. See that word? Used back in verse 1. I think it's significant. How the animals came about, how the plants came about, how the trees came about, how man came about. It's a little bit different there. God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female. He created them. We'll talk a whole bunch about this image of God. How and what is that? And we'll look at that. And God blessed them and said, be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth, subdue it, rule over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the sky, over every living creature. God said, behold, I've given you every plant yielding seed on the surface of all the earth, and every tree that has fruit yielding seed, it shall be food for you. And we've read the last couple verses there. So that's how we're going to begin. So go through chapter 1. I'll give you lots of things to think about. Okay? What could this mean? And next Sunday, Lord willing, we'll get our questions, and we'll just start plowing through this as we think about this idea of beginnings. Okay, we'll stop for now. Thank you.